Welcome to the Horsewoman's Almanac.
This is a modern field guide to what horses can teach us about changing our world and ourselves.
This podcast is for anyone craving a deeper life, a wilder perspective, and maybe just a little less existential spiraling.
I'm Caroline Culbertson.
And I'm Beth Bears. Thanks for being here. I am so excited. Our guest today, Cate Havstad.
This is the episode everyone needs, honestly. We need it for our hearts.
Let's hear from Cate. Here we go. Cate, thank you so much for being here. I have my two favorite horse girl blondes, which I was just saying to Caroline, this is so crazy because I met you both on Horse Girl Internet. Basically, Cate and I weren't sure if we were going to be catfished. We DM'd online about me coming up and custom building a cowboy hat. I had been a fan of Cate's cowboy hat company for years and all of her farming in Oregon stories. And so I booked a plane ticket and Cate invited me to her farm, not knowing anything about me. And from the moment we met and started walking the farm, it was like instant friendship. I think what I want to start with Cate, because Caroline and I were just both so moved and blown away by your beautiful Substack piece, which we'll link in the show notes, but you've written that was the most vulnerable you've ever been. What made now the right time to start telling this story publicly?
I think probably a lot of women who have gone through postpartum could relate. I think it was like I had finally gotten to a place of some kind of clarity. I think that there was just, whether you want to call it brain fog or just what it took to honestly process some of the trauma and challenges that I went through in my pregnancies. It just took some time to really digest it all. And also desire to release it. Like, I didn't need to hold on to it anymore, and I wanted to release it. And writing is often how I process and how I release.
You mentioned the term matrescence, which I honestly wasn't familiar with, and it's still not widely known. Can you describe that for us in your own words?
So beautiful.
Yeah, matrescence is a word that I also didn't know about going into pregnancy or becoming a mother. And I came across it because of this brilliant writer, Lucy Jones. And she wrote a book called Matrescence. And it's essentially just, it's a word to try and encapsulate the process of becoming mother. And she just so beautifully helped articulate what is kind of a never-ending process, but for sure it's becoming a mother is way more than getting pregnant, way more than birthing a baby. It's way more than the first 3-4 years. It's everything that comes through all of that time and everything that will come. And I think it was a powerful word for me to come across, because it took me years to just get clarity on everything that I had been through, and that I had lost my footing for a while. And that is almost, for a lot of women, an inherent part of the becoming, is to sort of lose your footing for a while and to rediscover and be in a process of rediscovering who you are.
I think, Cate, it would be really lovely if you're up for it, if you could tell us a little bit about your birth story, because this was so important in that journey of becoming, and it really seems like that's part of the phase that you sort of began to lose your footing. And I can relate so heavily to this. You said that your first pregnancy, you have 2 sons. You said your first pregnancy was just easy, like rock star pregnancy. And I think that I can also relate to, like, I wanted to do pregnancy right. Like, I wanted to, like, win pregnancy. And then I also had this, like, unexpected birth with my first that made me feel like It was the first time that I realized that parenting is all about how you can't control anything. But take us like through that journey a little bit, through that first pregnancy and then into your first birth.
Yeah, so rockstar pregnancy, I feel like the hormones really suited me. And I would say in that first pregnancy, while we weren't necessarily trying, but we also weren't not trying. And so it was a little bit of a surprise, but it was everything. We wanted it and we were ready, or we thought we were ready. Mm-hmm. And I do think the hormones suited me. I also wanted to do pregnancy right. I wanted to really win at pregnancy. And I'm such like a eager high performer that I was like, yeah, I can just be me. But I'm just doing this and I'm me. And I can still keep working as hard. I can still run these businesses. And I did for that pregnancy. I really worked until like pretty much I went into labor. I had some funny physical things happen. Like my hands went numb for the last like 5 to 6 weeks of my pregnancy. I think I was just so inflamed and puffy. It was like constricted blood flow to my hands. And I'm a hat maker. And I just worked through that. I was like, yeah, my hands are numb. Like, this is weird. But like, and then it was kind of strange COVID times. And so I felt nervous about being in the hospital setting. So I did all of my research and I read, I'm such like a crunchy, organic, holistic girl and I feel so strong. I was like, I could rock a home birth. If anyone can rock a home birth, I can. And so that was the plan we had made. And I was limited on what my midwife options were because a lot of women at that time wanted home birth because of COVID concerns in the hospitals. And I didn't know the right questions to ask. I didn't like even want to think about the possible negative outcomes. So I didn't really ask the right questions to prepare for those possible outcomes. And so when I went into labor, it became a very difficult home birth attempt. And I labored for, I'm forgetting exactly, but it was like over 36 hours at home. And it was like everything wasn't going right. The water pool was not staying inflated and they couldn't keep the water warm. And I felt like my midwife was really distracted. And I found some things out afterwards that really helped me understand what was unfolding with my midwife. She was like kind of constantly on her laptop and it didn't feel like she was in it. Yeah, I found out later.
She Googling like what was going on because she was under like
she had taken on too many clients and was behind in her charting from the previous births, and so she was catching up on charting. I found all this stuff afterwards and I was like, oh my God. So she definitely wasn't in it with me. Thank God I had a good friend who was my doula. And she, with my good friend Mariah, my doula, and my husband, they were truly my support team. And again, I just kind of waited to be like, oh, the instincts are kicking in. I know exactly what position to take. And this is how I'm going to solve it. And it just didn't happen. I was like looking for the direction, but I wasn't getting it. And after the 36 hours of laboring, it wasn't going well. He wasn't ascending. And I found out later I wasn't even dilated enough to be pushing when I started pushing.
Oh, no. And that'll really swell your cervix. And that's like recipe for disaster.
That's 100% what happened to us. And also the midwife had told me he was in this certain position, which once I got to the hospital, I don't think that he had changed positions between home and getting to the hospital. Once I got there, they were like, he's not in that position and you're not dilated enough. And I was like, oh my God, what does this mean? So we were monitoring his heart rate, and so at the end, it was very clear his heart rate was decelerating with every contraction. She was telling me to try and not push through those contractions, but once you're at that point, like trying to force yourself to not let your body do, which is bear down, was like impossible. So we did the most uncomfortable thing possible at that moment, which was load into my like Dodge Ram 2500. I could not sit down because there was a head in my vagina.
Yeah.
And so we rode, it was 7 minutes to the hospital here in Madras, and I rode, on my knees facing the seat. Like, it was just like crazy. Once we got to the hospital, I felt like we got all the help that we needed. And they were able to give me an epidural, and it gave me a chance to rest, rehydrate. I was extremely dehydrated, and recover. And the doctor who had been my primary care through preparation, she really was more cautious, as in, we should prepare you for C-section. Like, if his heart rate continues to decelerate, we want you to be ready for C-section. And my nurses were absolute angels, and they really advocated for me to have a chance to rest, recover, rehydrate, get calmed down, and try again. And so I ended up having Heston vaginally, and they really coached me through, and we got through it. But one of the situations that if this happens with, high stress births, there had been some meconium. He had pooped meconium. And so when he came out, he aspirated that, breathed it in. And so they very quickly kind of had to swoop him away and clear his passageways and actually like breathe for him for the first couple of hours and get him stabilized. And I was just so out of it because we live rurally. In our small hospital here, doesn't have a proper NICU. Once they got him stabilized, they transferred him to the NICU, and I had to stay, and then I went there the next morning. So that was like a really unexpected, crazy, traumatic thing. And like you said, just one of those first, I'll never forget this moment. I was in the shower at home, and it was really at the end when we were trying to decide to transfer or not. And I was in the shower trying to calm the contractions, and it was me and my husband was sitting on the floor, and we were just looking at each other, and I was like, what do I do? And he, of course, was like, I support you any which way you decide to go here. And the one thing that I just, like, I got this ping from the universe, and the message was, like, you don't have to be Superwoman. And it was just like a lightning rod moment of clarity, and I think it's one of those lessons I'll forever take with me in motherhood, which is I'm such an independent, like, I'm strong, I can overcome this, there's a challenge, I'll solve it person. Birth, it's not one of those things that you can power through.
That moment of intuition also, it sounds like it honestly saved your life and your son's life.
And that was exactly what we needed, was help. And it took me a long time to kind of even put the word trauma to that experience, and to truly process what birth trauma meant to me in that experience. That just, again, I wish for every woman to have a wonderful and smooth and easy birth. But the reality is a lot of women end up with birth trauma. And I think I went a really long time before somebody helped me put that word to it, which then gave me permission to start processing it in a way where I could actually address the trauma and work through it. And that didn't really happen until the third trimester of my second pregnancy. I just thought that I could still kind of, that was terrible and hard, but we're fine. But I did, once I started processing the trauma, I realized that I had carried a lot of shame after that about, one, I failed. Two, it could have gone so different. If we had not transferred when we transferred, I don't know if Heston would be with us. And that sort of guilt really sat heavy on me for a long time, and it went unaddressed in me for a long time. And I had a really wonderful counselor that I started seeing in my second pregnancy with my son Crosby, because I had severe anxiety come up. And she was she started to help me unpack it and was like, yeah, what you experienced was a birth trauma. And with women who go through a birth trauma, it's very common to have severe anxiety come up in your next pregnancy. So, like, that's where we're at, and let's start uncovering this. So, thank God for mental health professionals.
As someone who has struggled her whole life with anxiety, not necessarily around birth, but that sort of unprocessed trauma, in whatever word trauma is used in your life, or the disassociation, or the I'm Superwoman, I got this, because our society tends to demand that women are superwomen all the time, and that's what it we've grown up feeling like is expected of us. Cate, for you, with your therapist, when you were realizing that you had this unprocessed trauma, do you know like what it was that sort of was able to have it move through your body or release? Because I know there's certain things like EMDR, and some people
Mm-hmm.
find it in equine therapy, that it's very big with the horses because it brings you back into your body. But was there something that like sticks out to you, just as someone who's been through that and come out the other side, that you would say made the difference, I guess?
Yeah, I started doing a hypnobirthing course during my second pregnancy because I just was like, I'm willing to try anything to help control my mind this time. I'm a big fan now of hypnotherapy. I think that it was a way to help I think I spent years disassociated for sure from my body from all of that. And so there was something about the process of going through some hypnosis training that I think really helped. And then for sure, just talking it out with her, putting my finger on it. And then, I mean, just really needing to like meditate in preparation for that next one. But the hypno, it's not for everybody, but the hypnobirthing course really helped me, and I took it very seriously.
You said that you had postpartum depression with your first, but not your second. That was the same with me. And I think I didn't recognize for a really, really long time what I was experiencing was postpartum depression. I really didn't know what it was. I thought that it was just my new reality as a mother. And I remember one evening, I walked outside, and the sun was like starting to go down. And if you have ever been in like newborn land where you're up all night with a newborn, when the sun starts to go down, it's just this like sinking feeling of dread. And I remember being outside and walking back up to the house, like walking up this hill back up to our house. And I just was like, if this is what it feels like to be a mom, can't, I can't be a mom. Like, this is not for me. And I was so confused, I guess, about like how all of these women were just carrying on feeling like this. And I just thought that that's just how everyone felt. Cate, I wanted to ask you, when I was reading your story, what did it feel like for you? Like, what was your experience? Like, what did it feel like in your mind? What did it feel like in your body? Or were there any moments that stood out to you that you were just like, this ain't right?
Honestly, I think I masked it a lot with trying to work through it, and then also believing that I had enough mental fortitude to just like move through it. And I should add that for a long time I was confused about whether or not it was postpartum depression or my dad. My dad started dying just a few months after I gave birth, and so like was I sad because of postpartum depression? Was I sad because I was losing my dad? It was kind of all mixed. And then I should add, because our life is so tied to land, there was a huge amount of grief also unfolding for us as a farm because we were losing all of our irrigation water. So it was like 22, 23 was the height of our water loss here on our farm. And that was when I was in the thick of it all. So it was kind of a perfect storm. I think even when Heston was sleeping well, I still wasn't sleeping well because I was so anxious. Like, I was checking to see if he was breathing.
Yes.
Like,
It's so relatable.
right? I think a lot
Yeah.
of women experience
Everyone,
that.
yeah.
and it's like, it's sort of normalized. And I couldn't, my husband couldn't relate because, again, once I read this book, Matrescence, and I started learning about the actual biological reorganization of our brain through the process of pregnancy, where certain parts of our brain literally shrink and others expand. I was now biologically extremely different than my husband in that, and I still am. Like, my reactions to someone almost falling is still like,
Oh my God.
My husband moves like molasses, and I'm like, you know.
It makes me so mad. It makes me so angry. I'm like, you've got to always be on, bro. And like, why are you like not like me? And it just,
Yes.
we have to talk about this more because how are you not moving at 100,000 miles an hour on a daily basis? And like,
Yes.
but not why am I, but like, why aren't you? It's a problem.
Our brains are now completely rewired to be the ones really responsible to sense out all potential danger. So that inherently sends you into a hyperactivated mode. So I was reactionary. I was kind of just quick to react. Everything in my body was tuned to sense danger. And so that carries beyond the rational stuff of make sure that the baby doesn't like choke or the baby doesn't, and it does bleed into a lot of other areas of life. So I just found myself hyper anxious about things that I didn't need to be hyper anxious about and I hadn't struggled with in the past. So that's really how it manifested. And again, it was like, why am I so kind of like quick to be frustrated at my husband, and again, just I didn't have the language yet or even the knowledge about the pure biological changes to my brain that would now separated me from him even more than just being man and woman.
It's fascinating that this is not taught at 13 when we're taught about puberty. Like, it goes back to even like what's happening right now with perimenopause research and menopause, because it's been ignored for so long and women are going through that. And it's the same thing with postpartum. I mean, thank God for women speaking up and writing books, and Cate writing beautiful pieces about this, because otherwise, there's nobody else helping others get through this from a medical perspective.
No, the science isn't there. Lucy Jones wrote this. I was going to pull up the stat exactly so that I get it right. I took so many notes when I was listening to her book on long walks.
Cate, by the way, is my resident book club. Like, from the moment we met, she introduced me to Wendell Berry and Temperance Creek, this other book that, like, changed my life. So any recommendation, everybody listening, from Cate for a book, you're going to love it.
And Matrescence, it's like, take it with a grain of salt. Like, not everything that Lucy Jones, writes about and experienced I can relate to. That's not the point. I think the point is more women sharing and like pulling out of the shadows and shining a light on this stuff so that we don't feel so alone when we're in it, or we might have a little bit more resources to understand it. And if we can understand it, I think we'll carry less shame about what's going on with us. But again, to go back to the so this is from her book and her extensive research in this field. We didn't know anything about the maternal brain until the 2010s.
Okay.
The 2010s.
Okay.
This ties into the fact that women did not have to be a part of scientific research until 1993. So when anyone was doing some sort of a clinical trial... Yeah, like
I was almost 10. I mean, that's wow.
And that's that when we think about maternal care in this day and age, I think we're getting to a point where more and more of these stories are being talked about because science is starting to catch up. And so they're even working on new drugs that would help women with postpartum depression that would work much faster than most other antidepressants, because they really want the mother to not lose out on those early days of connection if she's truly having this chemical challenge. So science is just starting to catch up.
I was going to say, what's the explanation for postpartum of having a three-nager and wanting to literally jump off a cliff when the tantrums don't stop? Because it's not technically postpartum, so.
That's matrescence, baby. Yes, I can relate.
Sometimes dissociation is a tool.
It is. that's the important thing about all this, and like in finding a way to have compassion with yourself is like even these dysfunctional ways that we act, they are tools. Dissociation is a protective mechanism.
I remember having a conversation with my husband after my or no, just before my second baby was born. And I had learned a little bit about your hormone levels during breastfeeding, and basically how like you are always, because you're breastfeeding your kid, you're getting such a high dose of like those love and satisfaction hormones all the time, but your husband isn't. Like they're just going about their life, and so they still might like make a bid for connection that feels completely overwhelming to me because I'm fully hormonally satisfied in this area. And so I remember learning about this a little bit and having this conversation with him and just being like, I just need you to understand, if it feels like I'm shutting you down or, you know, that kind of thing. It's not because I necessarily even feel disconnected from you. It's because hormonally, I don't need you for the next 6 months to a year. And also, I recognize that it is not going to feel like that for you, and you will probably feel like a third wheel. And that's hard. I didn't need connection with him, which was so different than when I'm not pregnant or have not just had a baby. And it was really nice to put some verbiage to that. So it just goes to show, like, when we have an understanding about something or we have some vocabulary behind it, it really you can then give yourself or your partner the tools or the conversations that need to happen ahead of time so that everyone is prepared.
And I think it's also like one of those things, even with disassociating from trauma, you know, something I think about a lot is being comfortable with being uncomfortable. And that goes for like marriage too. Like instead of walking on eggshells, you had the real conversation with your husband. You had sort of an uncomfortable, like, I'm not going to feel this way about you. And that takes, I mean, there's a lot of relationships, I'm sure, that aren't having those conversations, and that makes it even harder when you have a newborn who's not sleeping and all the things. But I do think as a society, and obviously with technology, and we're constantly numbing and clicking and searching for distraction and overworking and all the things to just stop ourselves from feeling the discomfort and knowing we have the resilience to get through the discomfort, which is also needs to be acknowledged more, I think.
With your second baby, you asked for a lot more help, and you asked for it kind of very plainly. How did you ask for help? What difference did that make for you? And like, what do people need to know if you had to tell somebody who's afraid to do the same?
I opened up to a handful of, trusted girlfriends, that I had the postpartum depression the first time that I didn't really deal with, and that I was afraid that I was kind of doomed to have it again, which I didn't. And I still kind of hid that I had such severe anxiety in that third trimester, and I was really just dealing with that between my husband, my mom, and my counselor. But in preparation for the birth, we didn't have an easy birth the second time around, but I had a completely different frame of mind about it. The hypnobirthing absolutely served me through that whole process because I was able to stay calm and just ready to surrender. And we did. We had to decide and surrender and decide, you know what, it's time to make the move for a C-section. And so Crosby was born by C-section, and again, it wasn't as dramatic as Heston. He was in a much better state, but they did decide he needed to be transferred to the NICU in Bend, which is 50 miles from our rural hospital. So I was like, oh my God, again, I'm about to be separated from my baby. We're going to be back in the NICU again. And that first night, my mom was with me, and we stayed in a hotel near the hospital before they could get us into the Ronald McDonald House, which I could write an essay about how grateful I am for the Ronald McDonald House programs. But food is my love language, and nourishment is how I heal. And I'll never forget that first morning. I, was looking at the food at the hotel buffet and started sobbing. And I was like, I can't, like, I had all my postpartum meals prepared and in my freezer at home, but I was an hour from home.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, it's happening again. And so I texted my friend Mariah, who had been my doula through the first, and I was like, I need food. I need the kind of food that I like. And so she took the charge and she contacted like 5 other women who live in Bend who are all a part of our like farming network here. And I like get chills just thinking about it because all these women showed up with like baskets full of tinctures and herbal brews and the most like Ayurvedic based, postpartum meals. And it was just like, they just showered on us this nourishment that like, that is my love language, is to grow food and feed people. And so that was one of those moments where it was like a knot in my stomach. I got to tell you, even to ask for that help. Cause I'm like, oh my God, these people are busy. They've got their kids to deal with. Like, but I'm so glad I made that ask for help, because if another woman were to call on me and have the vulnerability to be like, I really need your help right now, I would be like, thank you so much for asking. Yes.
As mothers, we're forced to sort of reckon with the future in a new way, because it's not just about us anymore, it's about our children. And I think this is really a good time too, Kate, because food is your love language, and the land and growing food is your own answer in some ways to like that uncertainty. And it's really is, you are a mother who's taking the matter into your own hands. So will you talk a little bit about Range Revolution and how that came to be, and about your work in regenerative agriculture?
Yeah. Well, it ties in with the pregnancy because I got pregnant with Heston the same year. Well, excuse me, I was pregnant with Heston, the year that I started Range Revolution. And by all measures of sanity, you don't start a new company when you're pregnant. But I will say that, like, again, we were talking about that those pings of intuition. I felt extremely creatively charged through both my pregnancies. I think the act of creation and its physical form of birth or pregnancy is like very tied to all creative manifestation. So I couldn't deny the urge to start Range Revolution. And it started because I was seeking to build a product which I thought was going to be for my hat company, which actually, Beth, you are the impetus for this thing I wanted to build, which I thought would be a hat luggage piece for Havstad Hat Company, which is a business I'd operated for 10 years. But I wanted to find leathers that align with my ethos. And again, I'm an organically minded woman. I want to buy and eat from my ecoregion. I want to find things that are actually a part of regenerating the landscapes we live in and the communities we're a part of. And so when I sought out to find that in leathers, I was met with nothing, no options. And I started to dig into, okay, why can't I get regional hides? What's happening to all the hides of all the cattle that all of my friends in the regenerative ranching world are raising? And I found out very quickly that almost all the hides from mid-sized family ranches like ours are going into the trash. That was like one of the first learnings. And I was like, this is insane. And then when I started to peel back the layers of, okay, where is most leather coming from? If I call up a tannery and I'm trying to source some leathers, like, where do they come from? Either the tannery can't really tell you, or it's such an opaque and a lot of times intentionally opaque supply chain that's often covering up the fact that it's a global supply chain. Often they're coming from places like Brazil, where the ranching in that region often leads to deforestation. So I, as a systems thinker, was like, okay, we have regenerative ranches in America, family ranches like ours, who are enhancing their ecosystems through how they manage their cattle. They're losing out on about 35% of every carcass that gets sent to the abattoir to become meat on the table. That leads to negative economic outcomes for those ranchers, which ultimately negative economic outcomes for ranchers equals negative outcomes for the land. And then we also have this globalized supply chain of leathers that is perpetuating deforestation in other places. So why not solve that? And that was the start of Range, and it the mission has become even bigger since then, but that was the basis.
For people who don't know kind of the basics of regenerative farming, can you give us like a little crash course? And one of the things that you said was that an economic loss for the rancher is also a loss for the land. And I want you to explain that a little bit more.
Yeah. So, my husband and I are first generation farmer ranchers, and that comes with blessings and curses, and that it's really difficult to start something on your own and build something in agriculture from the ground up with nothing. I mean, regenerative is the word that we use nowadays, but you could use the word ecological. You could, organic is like a component, but it's not the whole picture. But essentially, regenerative farming or regenerative ranching is a system of management and it's a system of thinking whereby we make decisions about how we manage land or what enterprises we might have on our farms and ranches based on what regenerates the landscape and creates better outcomes for the land and for the entire ecosystem. So, all farms have to be financially viable to be sustainable. And sustainability is like baseline. Are we sustaining something? But something that I like to remind people of, which is that over the many decades of conventional farming we've had for the past 50 years, to sustain what is status quo right now is sustaining a pretty shitty baseline. There's been a huge amount of soil loss. There's been a huge amount of nutrient density loss in our soils because of the way it's been treated before we got here. So it is our generation's opportunity and task to regenerate these landscapes, rebuild that soil health, rebuild some ecosystems function, not just for the products that come off of this land, but it's so that the native bees have flora, so that the elk that pass through the grazing lands that we manage, they have a feed base that is biodiverse for them. And then you can't leave out the economic component because these farming communities, these rural landscapes in America, as farming has gotten very consolidated and very corporate over the last 50 years, it has degraded these communities hugely. And so much of regenerative farming and ranching is also about how we regenerate the communities, how we regenerate main streets in these rural communities so that our children have school systems, so that the elderly have proper care facilities here, and that just the whole thing can continue. But again, like the baseline that everyone is starting from is a place of serious degradation. And so there's everything that we have to do has to be with that regenerative mindset.
This is just a perception, so you tell me if I'm wrong, but it seems really rare to me now it's 2025. It was several years ago, 10 years ago, it sounds like, about when you guys started, to be a first generation rancher. I do not feel like I hear that story very often. And I'm wondering why you think that is.
It's so hard. It's so hard. And I think there's so many barriers to entry, like land prices. When we purchased this property, the only reason we were able to get onto this land is that Chris's parents had sold their house in Bend, and they were willing to go in on this property with us, and the dream was a multi-generational farm and ranch. That didn't work out, and it's all good, but they decided to move to Boise and have a proper retirement, because you can't retire on a farm.
No.
Too much work.
As a farm owner, no.
Yeah, no. And so then we figured out very quickly how to work with a local farm credit union to finance buying them out of part of their investment in this property. But I say that because I don't want to just paint some picture of like, oh, by pure bootstrap pulling, we figured it out. We had some family support to get onto this land. And this property has more than doubled in value since 2017, even though we have lost, a significant amount of our irrigation, which is what makes a farm like this go. So land value is a huge barrier for people. And I'll also add this, like, even if people get started in it, Many people don't make it past 5, 6, 7 years. And there's a couple of reasons I've seen cited in the statistics. One is that marriages fail. And two, it's just like general burnout. There's a social element to whether or not regenerative farms and ranches make it. And it's something I talk about with my peers a lot. And this does tie back into Range's mission to increase the economic realities for these ranchers that we work with, because the financial stress of trying to figure this out in this current economy puts so much pressure, say on a young couple like Chris and I, and it's by pure stubbornness and a lot of work between the two of us to keep it going through serious stressors. So those are big barriers, but it's not impossible. There's a new dawn coming where what we need to happen is we need wealthy landowners, people who are going to be the landholders, to truly partner with young producers in long-term ways. And that, like Range Revolution, companies, off-takers is the term I'll use. We need to build business models that are regenerative, and that our commitment to the ranchers that we're working with, these are long-term commitments. We need to build like perpetuity into our planning. And so you'll never find any product on the Range Revolution site or through any collaboration we do that's with any leather except for leathers that we trace back to these regenerative ranches. It's not like, oh, here's our core collection and then here's a special limited edition drop item. No, the whole collection and the entire ethos and the center pillar of the company is this form of sourcing, because that's what it's going to take to build long-term rebuilding with these partners, so they can trust us that we're going to take this off their hands year after year after year.
And I want to speak to Cate also and our mission together with the regenerative leather cowboy boot that we're launching through Range Revolution. We've talked, you and I, a lot about the fashion industry and about aspirational values. And I think you just speak so eloquently to this. Could you talk a little bit about, I guess, how we can move our dollars and aspirational values with what we put on our bodies and how we express ourselves creatively through fashion?
One of my regenerative agriculture soil geek heroes, her name is Nicole Masters, and she speaks really eloquently to the logjam is oftentimes, whether it's in society or at the farm gate, it's in the mindsets. And I believe that as a society, in a much bigger pop culture lens, there's a bit of a logjam in our mindset around what we aspire for, like to be. And fashion, after spending 10 years trying to reach people through the food on their plate, I just saw such a great opportunity, because fashion, it touches this side of pop culture where how we style ourselves, how we get dressed every morning, how we idolize certain celebrity figures or fashion and style icons, it's often a reflection of what we aspire to be. And for many, many decades, that aspiration has been wealth, power, exclusivity. I think we are in a moment where Mother Earth, our communities, our children really need us to think way beyond that version of what we have aspired towards. And I think fashion has a critical role in creating a much bigger pop culture narrative around redefining what is aspirational in this moment in human history, redefining what is true luxury. And if I were to paint the picture, which Beth, you and I share, and I'm sure Caroline, you're on board with this too, and I think so many people, but mothers, align with this. The world, the radical vision of the world that I dream of and work for is one in which we've restored nutrient density to our soils and thus the food that we eat. waters are running clean and clear again, and the salmon have come home to the Pacific Northwest, and our forests are being managed with more holistic and indigenous knowledge. We create true systems of circularity that don't just keep pumping plastic into this world because it never goes away. And that vision of aspiration also must extend into how we treat people. And the dirty, dirty secret of luxury fashion is that it's not like there's some better conditions for the workers in those luxury factories. What is actually happening is these companies make an exorbitant margin and they still pay those people poverty level rates. And I'll add, because I'm seeing this so clearly, I just took a sourcing and manufacturing trip down to Leon, Mexico. What also happens in the fashion industry is that when there are economic times of uncertainty, the big brands often just either stop or completely bail on their purchase orders. And so, thousands of people in these factories will not get paid for the work that they've done because this brand is just like, oh, we don't know what to do about tariffs, so we're canceling that PO. I'm sort of winding my way here to say that, Beth, you and I share the same vision of this future, and we truly believe that the future is what we design it to be. And it's tough to do that if you're a sustainability manager who cares about this stuff working within a giant corporation that is ultimately owned by the shareholders. It's going to be really difficult to change that from within that organization. I think that the next generation of truly sustainable brands are going to have to be disruptive brands like Range Revolution, or I'm currently decked out in my friend's regenerative cotton gear. Their brand is called Coed. All regeneratively grown cotton from the United States. I know the farmer they work with. Like, it's going to take that to truly disrupt. And again, I don't like to spend a lot of time pointing the finger at how wrong it's being done. I would rather lead from the front and shine the light on what's possible.
I think there's also something too for me, and obviously why I wanted to be a part of this with you, Cate, that feels, especially in our times right now, and especially now having been a mother for 3 years, how helpless I feel and how I don't know how to contribute to a better world. And for me, the work you're doing with Range, what we're collaborating on with the Cowboy Boot, it's giving me, it's like empowering. It's empowering me to feel like I'm doing something with my platform and my voice that will help our kids' future in a tangible way. Like, it is rebuilding the soil, these regenerative farmers, and that these beautiful, and Cate has this beautiful collection of bags. It's now all I carry, and each one has its own character because regenerative leather is also you're not uniform, right, Cate? With you don't have control over what hides. It's the ones that we're all going to be thrown away in the garbage. But how beautiful that whatever piece you have that you're putting on you not only is doing good, but also that it's unique to you, and that makes a statement too. And creatively, I find that super exciting as well.
Whenever I'm asked about, Range Revolution has assumed a position in the market where we embrace natural characteristics. These aren't flaws, right? Like our freckles and these wrinkles I have earned, they are not flaws. These are beautiful natural characteristics of a life lived. So Range has assumed that position in the market. Now, if we wanted to coat our leathers in a polyurethane coating and then stamp it again to look like the grain of the leather, we could achieve a version of what is called perfection. Perfection, typically in fashion, is a byproduct of petroleum. So we're trying to move away from that. We're trying to embrace what is true beauty. And to me, true beauty is those natural characteristics that nature imparts on us. And that's the concept of terroir. Like, I've been a geek about this term terroir in food, in wine, in all art that we create. Terroir is the natural characteristics that are imparted upon a piece by the place that it was created in. So that is like a part of this vision of aspiration. And the cowboy boots that we're building together, Beth, it's so exciting because this isn't a category that I really planned for us to go into. But when you started nudging me about this and you were like, I really want to make a boot.
Lifelong dream come true for me.
And thank God because Western wear and cowboy boots are having such a cultural moment where Beyonce has taken this into a category that it never lived before. I just saw Nike came out with a big Western buckle that says Nike Country, and I'm like, wow,
Wow.
I'm not here. Like, I embrace it all. Anything that is, I don't know, speaking to this culture is cool, but I guess the bigger question about this cultural moment for Western fashion and the zeitgeist, does it actually benefit the communities that we're emulating? Like, if this fashion is to like idolize and celebrate Western culture, let's make sure we truly preserve the people who truly live this Western life and care for these landscapes, because they're in real trouble right now. The future of farming and ranching in America is in a moment where it could very easily continue to slide into consolidation and corporate control, and it's happening all around me. It's going to take a very real commitment from the bigger society that we believe a distributed and a regional agriculture matters. And that starts at the level of design. Any person can go out in the world and source any old leather to create any old boot and any old bag. It is a radical act of love in this moment to take it all the way down to the granular level of how do these raw materials benefit these people who steward these landscapes in a regenerative way.
There's an incredible organization called Women in Ranching that Cate introduced me to, and we are going to be donating proceeds from our cowboy boot to that incredible organization that helps women, particularly in these rural communities that are ranching. So I wanted to make sure we shout out Women in Ranching as well, because they're an incredible organization. Talk about building community for the better and women helping women. Can't get better than that.
Yeah, Women in Ranching is an incredible organization, and they have held me through, these years. They've provided a brave space for all of us to come together and talk about these unique challenges. The birth challenges that I went through because I live in a rural area with limited hospital resources is something that like rural women can relate to. Or if you're a farmer and a rancher who happens to be in a bad domestic relationship, how do you get out of that and continue with your path in agriculture? If you have to get out of a bad situation, you need community. Like, I just can't stress enough, whether it's in the agriculture community, in the fashion community, as mothers, we need that safe space to come together and talk about these things.
You've built your entire life and all of your energy is going to this thing that you believe in. Like, you're kind of like living activism in a way. One of the things that I've learned a little bit about activism is that, and the good sides of it and the harder sides of it, is that you have to protect yourself and like your mental bandwidth and your energy and your time to a certain extent. Because I look at you and I'm like, this woman is like a beacon of the future, and like we have to protect her at all costs. And one of the things that I think so many women who listen to this podcast are going to be able to relate to is you've called yourself a recovering workaholic entrepreneur. I think that every mother to some extent is flirting with burnout.
Yeah.
Most of the time.
Yes.
And you've really had to sort of rewire your life, rewire the way that you think about protecting yourself and your time. And I know that your horses have kind of come into that picture as well. But how have you done that? Please help us figure out how to do that too.
I speak from no wisdom, only a constant quest. I mean, I've been through many bouts of burnout, right? I have continued to push the limits, and then I hit that limit and I'm like, oh, I did it again,
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, okay, one thing, a very tangible, actionable thing that I did just in this last year is that I promised myself, I have a naturopathic doctor, and she sees me. Oh man, she sees me. She understands my temperament and my makeup and what I tend towards. And so she kind of keeps me in check. And so we did a round of full hormone and blood panels. And I guess I just really needed some data to tell me what I already knew, which was that I was not in adrenal burnout, but like if I continued on the kind of trajectory of treating myself that I was, I certainly could be. I just took it as a straight up medical diagnosis that you've got to chill a little bit. That's going to look different for me than most people. Like, what is chill? For me, I will not sacrifice my weekends for work anymore. And that's very new. I used to be willing to work 7 days a week. And now I take my horses out. It's, at least one day on the weekend, I go have a date with my horses and I go just like tend to that side of myself. Of course, food and nourishment, like things are really out of whack when I'm not cooking for myself. If I'm rushing around, not making time to cook meals, I know the balance is off. And I just have been communicating this to my husband more because our life on the farm, it really could never stop. Like there's always something. You look out your window and there's always a project. And I'm just not in that era anymore. I was good at that in my 20s and then even in my early 30s. And I'm turning 35 this year. And I'm just like, you can catch these bite-sized moments of stillness. You can find 20 minutes to meditate every day if that helps you. You can go for an extended hour-long walk. You can you can take the time to cook the meal. I understand, trust me, that feeling and pressure that you don't have the time for the things, but I have personally experienced what happens in my life and the dominoes that fall when I sacrifice that. So I don't know. I hope that's tangible, and I've committed to weekly therapy. Like I have a therapist, and I check in with her, and she also holds me to account. So I think it's just about being honest with people we trust, and then just choosing what are those things that bring you the most joy. My rest and recovery days are actually really active because I'm with my horses, but because it fills that other side of this part of me, it's the most fulfilling thing. And so I'm calling this year my year of reclamation. And that's just a word that I use to just signal it's been a hard charging 4 years, starting with the first pregnancy, and a lot has unfolded since then. And this is really the year that I reclaim some of that vitality for myself again. One thing that I want to close with on this is that this work with Range Revolution, it really is it's such a love letter to the future. And it's about, like we talked about, redefining what is aspirational in this era for humans. We don't have to sacrifice our love of style and beauty to actually do something that is better for this world and for our communities. And the world, like you said, Beth, a lot of people need to feel some sense of agency, some level of participation. And not everybody either has the opportunity or the desire to steward a piece of land like we have the great honor of doing. But every single person has the opportunity to be a steward themselves through the small actions that we take in our daily life. And that, I think, sense of stewardship is a core value for Range Revolution. Every single one of us can be a steward through the food on our plate, through the clothes that fill our closet. And you don't have to do it all at once. You don't got to figure it out all at once. When it comes to your postpartum healing and processing trauma, it's not all going to happen at once. So if it's one garment at a time, if it's one meal at a time, if it's one outreach for help from your community that you have the bravery to extend the arm and say, I could use some help right now, those small actions are those steps towards being a steward and rekindling these connections that I think so many of us are really desiring a feeling to reconnect the dots on.